Hello everyone, I'm Bruffy1322 and this is going to be a very different video to what you're used to. It's about sport, but unlike most videos on this channel, not motorsport. This is a video about a football team. It's a football team that I played for multiple seasons and went on to manage and captain to multiple league victories, but it all started as just a group of mates brought together by one man, our pal Tale. Tale was always one of my best mates throughout our school days, and he remained so into our 30s. It was always a pleasure to receive a call from him about his next big crazy idea, and he always put in that extra effort to keep in touch. He actually always thought that I would end up becoming a math teacher, and I think he was genuinely surprised and impressed that I proved him wrong on that. I remember at school we had elections for head boy, and my name was surprisingly put up for it despite being pretty quiet. I knew I needed to do something different because nobody really knew me, and so I came up with this whole mafia shtick instead of the usual dreary head boy speeches that we had to give to every year of the school, which was basically standing in front of 250 other kids and teachers on 5 separate occasions. It was more of a performance than a speech, to be honest, and after the first instance of that where the other 3 who were up for the role did normal speeches and I did my thing, by the time the next assembly came around, the other 3 had completely changed up what they did to try and match me. I went from an absolute nobody and rank outsider to ending up being elected deputy head boy, finishing second for life, of course, behind Tale, whose general popularity throughout the school honestly wouldn't have been beatable anyway. But I remember him saying to me afterwards how worried he was that he'd actually lose if he hadn't changed up his own speech given my first performance. And that was some high praise. To make Tale have to actually think about something and work for something was pretty special, considering he was just so naturally talented at pretty much everything he attempted. But unfortunately there is a reason that I'm saying was rather than is.
Saeed Tale Ahmed was ambushed while filming for a Muslim TV channel.
He was in Ghana to report on charity work carried out by the Muslim community for the TV channel MTA. And it seems he was focused on his job to the very end.
Obviously, it came as a massive shock. Learning that one of my best friends was no longer with us. You don't really expect to be hearing that so soon in life. He was out there trying to do good work for his community, and while we always knew him to be religious, he never put any of that onto us as his friends. To us, he was just Big Tal, our outgoing, smart, friendly, hilarious mate. As a friend group, we kind of got split up a little bit after school by going to different colleges, which for those outside of the UK is the 2-year step before university. But we did stay in touch, and when Tale told us he was forming a football team to play in a local 7-a-side league, we were all up for it. But in classic Tale fashion, we rocked up to our first game at the English Martyrs College AstroTurf pitches in Hartlepool that we'd play most of our games on over the next 5 years, having never practiced together, in random grey t-shirts that we were hopeful would match up to form some sort of cohesive kit, and without a team name. It was only when we were in the male changing rooms and toilets getting ready that the name presented itself, and so the Gents were born. I believe this picture was taken on that day when we played our very first match back in 2007. And again, in usual Tale fashion, he wanted to make it just as fun off the pitch as it was on it. He started writing a blog about our games, which in those early days were mostly losses, putting a funny spin on our terrible performances. The team's tagline to this day, and coined by Tale himself, is "at the very forefront of finding new and unique methods of failing to win anything whatsoever since 2007. He was, a wickedly funny writer, and those blog posts became something of a weekly ritual. We'd all look forward to reading every new post after every game, and over time they got pretty wild with overarching storylines and characters that became crazy caricatures of ourselves rather than being based in much reality. Honestly, I'm not and never have been a good footballer. More often than not, I was probably the worst player on the pitch. I didn't even enjoy playing the bigger 11-a-side game, but There was something special about the Gents, and it was Tale that helped make it special. He didn't really care about how well we actually did. As long as we were having fun and trying to improve individually and as a team, he was happy, and the rest of us were happy as well. We ended up playing in that league for a total of 10 seasons across 5 years. When Tale moved down to London for university, he passed the captaincy of the team to me, his deputy since school, I guess, and since I was still relatively local, we continued playing for a number of years. In the final seasons of the league, we actually managed to get very competitive and ultimately won the whole thing 2 seasons in a row, which a number of us still have the trophies for since it meant so much. Captaining the team to 2 league victories and coming very close to a 3rd is still easily my biggest and really only achievement in football. And in keeping with Tale's wishes, I kept up with the blog, although in a much more matter-of-fact way, while still developing some writing skills, and he'd come back every now and then to do guest posts with more crazy stories. The blog is still available if you ever want to read it through. There's some absolute bangers in there, as well as full stats for the team in terms of who's played, how many times, and how many goals they've scored, as well as team stats like win rates and league positions. All of this started to be collected by Tale in the early days, since he really cared about making sure the team was bigger than just some friends playing football every week. When I took over, I just carried it on. Though I did try to expand on his original vision and made a Facebook page, Twitter profile, and even a full website with all sorts of information, of which this screenshot is the only remaining evidence since unfortunately it no longer exists. But I even got a logo developed for us and basically just tried to make us more official online, all in the name of fun of course, but also learning skills that I'd use later for YouTube and my personal social media that have helped me in building this channel. If I was doing YouTube back then, I'd no doubt be covering our progress and stories here as well. I always enjoyed managing and building up the Gents. Anyway, I'll leave a bunch of links in the description for your perusal if you want to follow the team's socials or just get more info. One of the highlights of our time together as a team was the London tour in 2010. We thought we were just going to go down to visit Tale and play a few games with some local teams, but the next thing we know, he's organised this multi-team tournament with referees and knockout structure and trophies and everything. That was always the way with Tal, everything done to the max. But even beyond the football, that trip was legendary. A group of late teens from a small town up north having amazing fun in the big city. Some of the stories from that trip I'll remember forever. But eventually, as with most things in life, we all went our separate ways after the league we played in disbanded, and aside from a few random tournament appearances or friendly games in the early 2010s, the Gents were pretty much done, given we had team members scattered around the country and indeed the world. And so that brings us to the here and now. Around 10 years after the team last played a game, even longer since we last played a game with all the specific team members from this 2009 photo, and almost 2 years after Tale had passed away, his brother Adil took on the mantle to organise the reunion of the team that Tale had always wanted to do but never got the chance. And with all of us in our 30s with our own lives and one of us living in friggin' China, it's amazing it actually came off. For one weekend, we'd be able to get together as a team, play some games again, and pay our respects to our fallen founder. Adil's last words with Tale were actually about the Gents, and in typical brotherly fashion, he had to prove his big brother wrong about us likely never playing together again. So I think it's about time I introduce you to the other members of the team, and this 2009 image is actually perfect for that, as everyone pictured here would be reuniting 14 years later. While we had a number of different players over the years, this was certainly the core friendship group who all went on the London trip as well. Obviously we had Tale, the mastermind behind it all, Adil, his younger brother who joined the team as soon as he was old enough, and myself who played in almost every single game the team had, a lot of them as captain. Then we had Tony, who some of you might know as he's featured in a number of GTA videos on this channel over the years.
No, we're going to be back at the checkpoint!
No! No!
No! Oh, I'm done! I'm so done!
Let's just go straight down. Oh no, don't, no.
Oh!
No! We're going to go back to the checkpoint! No!
and Dan G, who I think alongside Tony and myself were Talay's main friends from the school days. Then we had Jamie Shave, whose name lent itself very well to being an excellent goalkeeper, and had known Tony since they were very young, as well as Sutton, who together with Adil represented the first members of Talay's youth scouting programme to be promoted to the main team. And last but not least, Magson, arguably our best player back then and prolific goal scorer, who was also good friends with Talay at school and is someone I've known since the age of 4 years old. With the younger Adil and Sutton being Talay's brother and Magson's cousin respectively, the expansion of the tight friendship group that we had at school really made the team feel like a big family. One other team member who'll be joining us on this reunion tour was Johnny B, pictured here in a later team photo with the title-winning 2011 squad, who was another one of Talay's youth scouting prospects and became a great goal scorer for us in later seasons. And for one weekend, we'd all be back together again to play some football in honour of Big Tal. We started our journey where we'd always end our seasons, the Pizza Hut in Hartlepool. A tradition of course started by Talay. We'd reward ourselves after the final game of each season with some pizza, and usually we'd talk until they'd kick us out. But in true Gents fashion, we immediately had a problem. Magson, who was coming back from China for the first time in 4 years, had to drop out of the whole thing due to delayed flights. One might question the judgment in deciding to organise a weekend of playing football with one of the team getting off a plane from China the day before, but it was literally the only day where we could all even potentially make it work. Not having Magson was a big problem though, not only because he'd be one of our strongest players, but also because that left us with 7 people for the entire weekend with no substitutes. We'd all be playing every minute of every game, which wasn't the original plan. Nevertheless, it couldn't be helped, and after eating, we all headed back to the hallowed ground where we always played in those 10 league seasons for an updated team photo. 14 years later, but in the same spot and with the same people, this photo opportunity was the true start to our reunion. You'll get to see the actual photo at the end of the video. But before we left our original stomping ground, I made an important transfer of responsibility and put the Gents back into the hands of the family that created it. My time as captain of the team was over, and Adil was now the man to lead the team, given everything he'd done to bring us all back together. Let me see. I do want it holding out. And then, oh, I can see. Oh, look at that.
Number 7.
Look at the front. Oh, I love that.
Right back, number 7. Good, isn't it?
Yeah, that's nice. The next step of the reunion tour was down to Leicester, the place where Adil calls home, for a small tournament he'd organised, which acted as a way for us to figure out how to play together again after so long. And it worked. We won the first game 5-1, but lost 2 goals immediately at the start of the second game. We did rally and change things up, and the rest of the game was basically a 1-1 draw against the eventual winners of the tournament, in which their only goal against was from us. But those 2 early goals meant we'd end up losing 3-1 in that game. In the final game, we found our groove and ran out 7-4 winners to finish second in the tournament, and feeling like we were capable to win it if we'd been a little bit more on the ball at the start of that second game. One of the major problems we had though, honestly, came down to fitness and the heat. This was one of the hottest weekends of the year so far, and with some of us having never even touched a football in 10 years, let alone played a full match, we were suffering with no substitutes to allow for some breaks. The heat would get even worse on the following day for the main event, but for now, we went out to eat and talked and laughed late into the night, just like we did on the London tour 13 years ago. The next day was the big event, a single football match between us and a team of players from Talay's workplace to battle it out for the Syed Talay Ahmed Memorial Shield. But we had an important thing to do first. After grabbing a team breakfast at Tim Hortons, we drove from Leicester down to London and visited Talay's grave at the cemetery. While we reminisced and told fun stories about him, a particularly nice comment was made reminding us all how if Talay was here, he'd be wanting to commentate on the game, and in doing so, he'd have so much fun telling everyone the entire backstory and lore of the Gents football team. while making sure everyone knew how he was the mastermind behind it all and the sole reason for the team being where they are now. He'd be right, obviously. We wouldn't have been here if it wasn't for him. And in a way, that's what I'm trying to do in this video, is do what Tale would have loved to have done himself. But then it was down to business. As we made our way to Islamabad in Tilford, the international headquarters for the Ahmadiyya Muslim community of which Tale was a part and was a highly respected member of, we got our heads into the zone ready to play a football game. But when we arrived, I think we were all a little shocked at the scale of what we were about to do. You see, it just so happened that the weekend in which all of us were available on short notice to come together for this game was also the same weekend as some National Football League finals that were taking place at the same location. So instead of this football match being a small, friendly affair at some random AstroTurf pitches somewhere, it would instead be an exhibition match before the main event in front of hundreds of spectators, cameras, live stream, and commentators. The fact that they wanted us there to be a part of this showed how much Tale meant to their community, but for us, it was a little bit of a shock to the system. The most spectators we ever had when we played regularly was probably like 1 or 2, and it was usually whoever just happened to be subbed off at any given moment. This was a whole different level to what we'd ever experienced. It was a very Tale thing to do though, everything to the max. He'd have been absolutely loving it. And what an experience it was. We were made to feel like real footballers for a few hours with tunnel walkout, team photo, pitch interviews and all sorts. We're just some random guys from Hartlepool who played football together 10 to 15 years ago. We really weren't prepared for all of this. But we still had a game to play, and after all the pre-match arrangements, it was time to get started. The team that we were playing against was MTA, or Muslim Television Ahmadiyya, which was who Tale worked for. Both teams were playing for him, with all of us having his name on the back of our shirts. The main difference was that one team was made up of 7 of his school friends who hadn't played together or at all for years, and the other team was made up of 12 of his work friends who played significantly more frequently than every 10 years. And if that wasn't enough to show the difficulty of the task ahead of us, add in the fact that this took place on the hottest day of the year so far, in 30-degree heat and blazing sunshine, after having played 3 preparation games the night before. It was always going to be difficult for us. And I think the occasion got to us a little bit early on as we conceded almost straight away. But after that, the score held firm at 1-0 for quite a while. We figured out the night before that we performed better with 3 at the back, but that was on much smaller pitches, and it just wasn't working for us on this larger scale. We were too conservative. We were also having to deal with long balls and crosses, as well as bobbly grass rather than the smooth AstroTurf that we were used to. So despite all of it, we actually managed to get back into the game to make it 1-1 with a great goal by Sutton, and while it stayed that way for a while, we were just struggling to be any kind of threat going forward. We were just playing way too defensively, and we were always on the back foot. And then the tiredness started to kick in, because while MTA had 12 players for 6 outfield positions, we had 6 players for those same 6 positions. MTA had all those players not because they were actively trying to have an advantage, but just because so many of them wanted to be part of this match for their friend and colleague Tale. But the advantage was there nevertheless. We were getting more and more tired while MTA kept swapping players with rolling subs and constantly having fresh legs on the pitch. That eventually showed as they scored towards the end of the first half, and we went into the break 1 goal down. For the second half, we did change up the formation to only have 2 at the back, and that did work out better for us, but another goal for MTA meant that we were down by 2 for the first time. It was looking bleak, but we were having more opportunities in this half, with Johnny B especially performing really strong for us, and at one point he was taken out while being clear on goal. We couldn't make anything of the free kick that followed, but we did claw one back later on into the game, with B getting a great goal after Sutton made an excellent run. So we were still in it there or thereabouts, but we were always behind. Unfortunately as well, no sooner had we gotten back into the game than we were back to being 2 behind, conceding a scruffy goal as, our tired minds were focusing forward to get the equaliser, and ultimately that's how it ended. Honestly, I don't think there's a single scenario where we'd have ended up as winners of that game, from having some of us who hadn't played a game of football in 10 years, having minimal preparation in the less than a month since it all came together, and losing one of our best players the day before, to the other team playing much more regularly and having a seemingly never-ending supply of substitutes to always have fresh legs on the pitch. I think in the end losing 4-2 wasn't half bad. We had some good moments, like with Danji's great little dummies, Tony's solid central play snuffing out attacks, Shave doing his usual and making some great saves, Adil doing his best to open up the play and get forward, Sutton putting in a massive shift to try and get some goals, and Johnny B showing his class up front and arguably being one of our team's man of the match. We just didn't have the ability to do any more than what we did. From a personal perspective, I already knew that I wasn't a good footballer, but having to watch this game back for this video wasn't really the most enjoyable experience I've ever had. My only close to decent moment came late on when I made a good run on the left and Sutton picked me out well, but my lack of confidence in my own ability and the fact that we were, down on goals didn't let me take a shot myself and test the keeper. Instead, I tried to pass it to B, who honestly would have had a better chance of getting it on target, but it was intercepted. In hindsight, I should have just had the shot, really. And these are the kind of runs that I used to do regularly for the Gents as well, but a combination of being too conservative and suffering with fatigue meant I didn't get the chance to do it as much as I'd have liked. If you want to watch the full game, there will be a link in the description to it, but be warned, a lot of it is pretty shambolic from us, especially in the first half. But I guess we did have some good moments here and there, most of which you've seen in this video because, when it comes to the Gents, I don't mind being as biased as possible and only show our best bits. But the circumstances meant that it just wasn't anywhere near often enough to have those best bits. In terms of match stats, we actually had one more shot on target and in total than MTA, but the possession is where the difference was made, with MTA having the ball 64% of the time. But ultimately, none of that really mattered. We were all here to have a friendly game of football to honour our old friend who impacted our lives in so many ways, and what a way to do it. Tale would have loved the fact that we were all here for him, and a massive thank you has to go to MTA for providing a lot of the footage you've seen on the match in this video, as well as being great opposition, in addition to the entire Ahmadiyya Muslim community for being such great hosts and making us feel so special for a day. It certainly all got a lot bigger than we ever initially planned or could have imagined, and without all that, this video probably would have just been a collection of random GoPro shots from some AstroTurf pitch somewhere. Also thanks to Tale's family who were there to watch, especially his mum and dad who I've known for a long time now and was so thankful to us for making the long journey to play. Of course, there's also a massive thank you to Adil for taking on the challenge of bringing us all together one more time, and honestly the entire team for making it work within all our busy adult lives now.
It's almost bittersweet in the sense that you lost a game, but in the spirit that it was played and in the remembrance that while we were playing this game, it was a win-win for both teams. But how was that game for your team?
It was hard work. We unfortunately didn't have any subs, and I think that you could tell on the pitch that made the difference. MT had the legs on us; they were rotating regularly. I'm not saying taking anything away from their performance. They played really well, playing out from the back, and their forwards, were tricky, hard to get a hold of. I think we turned it on in the second half a little bit, and we definitely had our opportunities, and unfortunately just couldn't take them today.
If you could introduce your teammate with you as well.
So this is Adam Bruff. He is the current manager of the Gents FC and was ex-captain before he handed it over to me at the start of this weekend.
Well, thank you very much for joining us, Adam. How has this whole experience been for yourself?
It's been great, honestly. Being able to come here for Tale, who was such a big part of our lives, and creating this team, and then being able to look after the team for so long as captain after he handed it to me, and then I've been able to pass it back to the family, to Adil. So it's been sort of the end of an era in a way, and it's a really nice way to cap it off, even though we lost. But that's kind of what we've done from the start, really. So even when Tale formed us, we were always losing. So yeah, It's as it should be. And as I said in that interview, back when Tale started this team and came up with our original motto, he never had any expectations that we'd ever win anything. As long as we were having fun, he was happy. And I think he'd be really proud of us for living up to the motto that he wrote for us. We really have been at the very forefront of finding new and unique methods of failing to win anything whatsoever since 2007. And this was one of the most unique ways of doing that even he probably couldn't have imagined. I know he's having a good old laugh at the irony of it all right now. We still really miss our mate and just wish he could have been here to see us on likely the biggest stage we'll ever play on. He's always going to have a spot on the Gents team, and it's been so wonderful to get back together with everyone for him. And I hope you guys have enjoyed a little bit of story time from an important period of my life before YouTube. It really has been a pleasure to bring you all on this journey with us. As always, thank you so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.